Hello. Hello. Always a good sign when you see lively conversation in a room. Delighted that you're all here this afternoon on this lovely sunny day, breaking through the rain this morning. On behalf of the IUA, I want to give you a warm welcome. We're delighted you could join us for this combined in-person and online event. We have in excess of 600 people registered for this event, about 150 I'd say or so in the room, and the rest munching their lunchtime sandwiches at their desk or kitchen table or wherever they may be. And I think we have people from right across the higher education system, from enterprise, from state agencies, from government. So I think a very broad representation. Can I ask to start with that you please have a look at your phone and make sure that it is silenced and that it remains silenced for the next hour or so. I want to particularly welcome our folks online. I hope you're hearing us loud and clear. So, to get proceedings underway, can I call on Professor Eva Lenonen, President of Maynooth University and in 2025 Chair of the IUA Council. And Eva will do the welcome address and introduce to you our guest keynote speaker today, Minister Lawless. Eva.
Aaja Achina Ushla Agus Ahodsa, Minister, fellow university presidents, distinguished guest colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to welcome you all today to IUA Future of Ireland event. This is part of a broader series that provides an opportunity for thought leadership and also enables us to hear from distinguished speakers. I truly believe that these kinds of discussions offer an invaluable space for reflection and, importantly, ambition. For imagining the kind of Ireland we want to create and for examining the role that higher education and research must play in bringing that vision to life. I'm delighted to welcome Minister James Lawless as our keynote speaker. Welcome, Minister. There's a certain symmetry about today's event. Just over 5 years ago, at the inaugural Future of Ireland event, the then leader of the opposition, now Taoiseach, Martin T.D, first announced his intention to create a new department for further and higher education. Minister Lawless was the Fianna Fáil spokesperson for research and higher education at the time, and no doubt played a part in the decision to set up the new department. So it's opportune that he's here today as the recently appointed minister in that very department. The creation of a dedicated department marked a turning point. For the first time, higher education and research received dedicated priority attention at cabinet level within government. And since then, we have made real progress. A clear decision on dealing with the core funding deficit through Funding the Future, the Higher Education Act 2022, and the establishment of Research Ireland, all signalling that this sector and the work it does matters deeply to Ireland's future. Well, sustainable funding is still a live issue, not least ensuring that government-led pay awards are fully supported across the sector. And while Ireland has a very proud tradition of research excellence, we are seeing signs of strain. Infrastructures are aging, investment has not kept pace, the competitive edge we are long relied on is no longer guaranteed. At this same time, our global context is growing ever more complex. Geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainty, technological change, all of these test our nation's capacity to adapt and lead. In such a world, our most enduring asset is our people, our talent from home and abroad, our ideas, and our ability to collaborate across disciplines and borders. These are the foundations of Ireland's high skills economy and of the innovation that will drive our progress in health, sustainability, security, and more. And that's why this conversation and your leadership, Minister, matters so much at this point in time. Now, universities are eager to step up to the plate, not just as beneficiaries of policy, but as active partners in its shaping and implementation. We need to be deeply embedded in government policy because this is not a one-way street. It's about the co-creation of the future for our nation through mutual evolution, a shared journey supported by sustainable funding and driven by a common purpose of public good. As Seamus Heaney reminded us, hope is not optimism, which expects things to turn out well, but something rooted in the conviction that there is good worth working for. And that conviction, the belief in the public good of education and research, underpins everything we do in universities. So, Minister Lawless, we are grateful for your engagement with us today. You bring to your role not only your deep commitment to public service, but also your strong academic grounding and legal expertise. A graduate of Trinity and DCU, and a proud representative of Kildare North, we look forward to supporting our shared vision for higher education and research in the coming years. So please join me in offering a very warm welcome to Minister James Lawless.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, President Eva, and thank you for hosting today's seminar, but also thank you to affording me an opportunity to set out my priorities and thoughts as I settle into the new role. I think I'm 3 months into the role now, and it is at time to be able to set out my vision and where I hope to bring the sector. So thank you for hosting this event and so many more events like it, which actually in their own right showcase that universities are a public good and indeed often form the public square, as you said in your introductory remarks, Eva. University presidents, esteemed colleagues, Deputy Malcolm Byrne, Chair of the Digital Committee, and many other esteemed colleagues, staff, students, researchers and friends. I'm delighted to deliver this keynote address to the Future of Ireland seminar today. I want to begin by thanking Jim Miley and the IUA for this invitation. And Jim, I'm mindful that this marks one of your final events as Director, and I want to thank you publicly for your outstanding leadership since 2018, and not just on behalf of the sector, even though that has been critical, and as President Eva reminded us, the conversations and calculations that led to my own department being created in 2020, which you were seminal in as well, because I remember well at the time, all of us working together to advocate for it, but also your work outside of your day job as such in charities such as Sightsavers and Concern. So I just want to take a moment to wish you every success in your next chapter and thank you for what you have done. And we might just give him a little bula boss. Now, we are at the start of the story of my chapter, I suppose it's starting now, and my department has only a few more chapters under it as well, because it's a 5-year-old department. But the story of higher education in Ireland has many books, but has had a couple of good chapters recently as well. And since the formation of my department, we have seen a period of intense change, technological disruption, impacts from climate, impacts from war, both old-fashioned and trade, and all sorts of disputes and international geopolitical realignments, pandemics and everything else. So we have seen a very turbulent period over the last couple of years. But the fundamental strength of our higher education and research ecosystem has allowed us to continue to succeed and in fact excel during that time. And I want to commend everybody in the room for being part of that strength and creating that resilience And not just that resilience, but that success and that ability to power on to greater things. And the research and skilled workforce that emanate from your universities have set in motion the huge economic and social progress we have made as a nation, as a society, and as an economy over the last 30 years. It has also equipped us to bounce back from economic shocks and disruption as they have occurred. However, we cannot rest, and as Chaucer said, time and tides wait for no man. So I want to look to the future. I want to look to the next chapters and the next books. I want to work with you to create that future that we all want. So what is my vision then for the future? It is a vision that recognizes higher education, research, and skills as foundational pillars for Ireland's economic strategy. It is a vision that sees us working together to advance a step change in research and innovation, to strengthen our skills base, and to provide high quality and accessible higher education. It is a vision that can give assurance and comfort to all of our citizens and stakeholders that we can react and respond to the various shocks, bumps, and pivots that will occur. Because the only constant in life is change. And the change itself is not the enemy, it's how we react and respond to change that shapes us and shapes our direction. And it is a vision of the future that students, academics, and researchers are inspired by and want to be part of it. That is what I want to create, and that is the future that I want to work with you at the sector and stakeholders to create together. I will set out in a little more detail each of those aspects now. Starting with my vision for R&I, research and development, research and innovation, I intend to place particular emphasis on strengthening Ireland's research performance. I want to channel research excellence into real impact for a competitive and innovating knowledge economy. By prioritising research, we can generate high-value jobs in emerging sectors such as artificial intelligence, semiconductors, life sciences, and many others, all ensuring sustainable economic growth. We saw Professor Conor Ryan in University of Limerick, Lero, created the first fabrication and design of a silicon chip without direct human input. That kind of impactful research is the type that I envisage more of. We must now work with our colleagues in DETI, Department of Enterprise, to create the high-tech export-based roles of the type that this research promises. Because it is a pipeline. It is a pipeline of research, basic research, to applied research, to product development, to innovation, to industry. And that is the spectrum, and that is the pipeline of talent and the pipeline of ideas that turns our academies into economies and puts in place the value add that cycles back around again with the public good. We will use strategic research investments to support growth in sectors where Ireland can be most competitive, such as pharmaceuticals, med tech, and advanced manufacturing. We will make targeted investment in research infrastructure, such as quite recently the Higher Education Research Equipment Grant and the recent 17.7 million Research Ireland Research Infrastructure Programme. Budget 25 includes an overall envelope of 309 million for Research Ireland to move ahead with its mission to support excellence across all disciplines. Research Ireland will fund research centres, regional ARC hubs, and high-impact initiatives such as the National Challenge Fund and Frontiers for the Future, enabling a shift from ideas to outcomes. We may not always agree. We will discuss, we will challenge, we will debate, we will listen to each other, and we will collaborate. And I welcome that because that is what makes our institutions great. That is what makes our researchers innovate. No discovery is made without questioning the status quo. As I mentioned at the outset, the public square is a place where ideas are exchanged and ideas are challenged. And that is what makes our universities great. That is what makes our values great. And that is a right that I will protect as long as I am minister. I have listened to you in my early months in this role, and I agree that we need a renewed investment programme. I envisage the PRTLI of the past returning in new form because that original programme was a turning point in Ireland's development as a knowledge economy and the state's first major strategic investment in research capacity, infrastructure, and training. It empowered Ireland's universities to define their own research priorities whilst ensuring that funding decisions were completely devolved to a world-class independent panel avoiding conflicts of interest. The audience here today, all of you, are only too well aware of the benefits that accrued from that programme. That programme drove collaborations, built capacity, and embedded excellence across disciplines, including the humanities and social sciences, as well as, of course, STEM. It changed the country, and it is time to deliver a new phase of that instrument. My department is a young one, and I recognise that research and innovation ambition on that scale has perhaps not been prioritised sufficiently in the last couple of years. There are many competing demands, there are many competing requirements, and it is difficult to do everything. I accept that. But as the new minister, I intend to prioritise that area, and I'm pleased to have the full backing of the Taoiseach and government in doing so. My ambition is to deliver a new programme that responds to today's needs while retaining the founding spirit of the original PRTLI. This will include targeted support for equipment renewal, recognising that much of which was funded under the original scheme is nearing obsolescence. We live in an age of change and moving times and moving targets, and equipment that was world-class 20 years ago is no longer world-class today. That is the cycle, that is how things work, that is why we must renew, replace, repair, and reinvest. However, the majority of funding I envisage will be reserved for a major competitive call based on application quality, one designed to drive institutional ambition, deepen collaborative links, and deliver real system-wide impact. Critically, it will not duplicate existing schemes. Instead, it will create space for excellence to flourish, independent of rigid priorities, responsive to strategic visions, and open to new ideas that can transform Ireland's research landscape once again. My department is actively progressing a new proposal for this, with stakeholders, some of whom are in the room, on working groups, and I intend to pursue a sustainable funding pathway through the National Development Plan. This significant multi-annual funding for a genuinely strategic, open-ended, capacity-building programme will be transformative. And as we debate, Ireland should, and I will, stand firm in our belief in scientific excellence and academic integrity, of truth and fact based on evidence. Excellence is something to be pursued and to be prized. We see around the world, I mentioned geopolitical tides. After the Second World War, America became a global leader in research. Many exiled European scientists, such as Einstein, Fermi, Szilard, and Edward Teller, made that move across the Atlantic. By investing heavily in university-led innovation and forging strong federal academic partnerships. This created a vibrant, well-funded ecosystem that attracted global talent and led to American dominance in areas such as physics, nuclear science, space, medicine, biomedical sciences, computer science, and information technology, along with many other disciplines. However, the last few months have undoubtedly changed how people view the United States when it comes to research and indeed higher education. It has unfortunately become a cold place for free thinkers and talented researchers. Faculties are having funding revoked, and institutes face shutdowns or significant impairments to their work. And we all know this will grind advanced research to a halt, as well as causing human suffering and an erosion of values of the public square and free speech on various campuses. It is very disturbing to read of library culls and books being withdrawn, something that should stay in the history books, not a part of 2025's free world. Setting aside any culture wars, I think investment in innovation and cultivating of the best minds is a key economic strategy. In Europe, we recognise that. The Draghi and Letta reports talk about our competitiveness being realised through innovation, through research, and investment in driving that forward. So Europe will do more. We know our European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has committed to putting research and innovation at the heart of the European economy. And Europe has pledged 500 million to make Europe a magnet for researchers during these uncertain times that may wish to relocate to Europe. That is a welcome response. And as Minister for the sector, I get it too. And as US research freedoms come under threat, we have in Ireland a unique opportunity to emulate that post-war success and see the tide of talent now flow in a different direction across the Atlantic. We can offer a stable, open, EU-aligned environment where world-class researchers can thrive, contribute, and shape the future of science. Ireland will be a welcoming host for the best and brightest, and I intend to bring plans through government in the coming weeks to enable that and put firm plans around that. We've done this before. We've been successful in the past in attracting top talent. A predecessor of the Taoiseach Emma de Valera, courted Erwin Schrödinger during World War II, another refugee fleeing Germany at the time, who went on to work and set up DIAS, the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies. When that was formed in 1940, it was only the second of its kind in the world and the first in Europe, a brave and bold decision. And Schrodinger's work, we know, led to discovery in genetics and many other forms. But DIAS continues to promote research excellence and is an academy so worth having such an important part of our ecosystem here today still. Ireland prizes science, research and academic freedom. And we know that talent is our greatest natural resource. It is also our best defense to any economic turbulence. I also want to look at our PhD graduates, because PhDs and our graduate population are essential to our future, driving innovation, fueling industry, and generating the ideas that power modern economies. With recent government measures, including increased stipends for PhD researchers and commitments to fund additional PhDs through the National Training Fund, we are further strengthening our commitment to supporting this vital talent pool. With global competition intensifying, investing in research, PhD graduates, and collaboration is the key to staying ahead. So a strong PhD culture, supported by initiatives, is a strategic necessity for a resilient, knowledge-driven economy and a more competitive, outward-looking Ireland. And again, I intend to strengthen the sector in the coming term, and I intend to seek additional funding through National Development Plan and other vehicles to invest in our PhD community, because I think that our researchers at every level are the foundation stone of a successful research and innovation economy. Initiatives already in place, such as Global Citizens 2030, have seen us appoint talent and innovation attaches in Boston and San Francisco. We have two young people, Daniel and Lillian, making that journey already, coming from my department to work in Boston and San Francisco, respectively. And they are beginning that outreach, and that will continue with more appointments in the months ahead. And we will look to collaborate, and we will look outwards in this uncertain world. Last Thursday, I was proud to sign the Associate Membership Agreement for CERN, bringing to, not quite a close because there's still a few procedural steps, but certainly bring it to a significant milestone, a 25-year journey for Irish science to become part of that international research community. That is an outcome I campaigned for as opposition spokesperson. I know people in the room, I see Sinead Ryan and others who are campaigning for many, many years towards that goal. International collaboration is the way forward. Best science knows no borders, and we collaborate, we compete, because we actually are at our best when we're in competition, where we collaborate, and we do so in a strategic partnership on every front. And that is the way that we will continue to shape our research horizon. We also will work with the European Universities Alliance and closer to home on the renewed North-South and East-West collaboration. I want to compliment organisations today in our performance to date, securing Horizon Europe funding. We are punching well above our weight, and we have drawn down nearly 895 million to date from those Horizon programmes. We can do even more, and we need to redouble our efforts to exploit this opportunity and focus on achieving the most from the remaining work programme for 2025 to 2027 and on into the next EU budget. And we must continue to advocate and lobby for the successful programme to be renewed, to be continued, to be extended, and notwithstanding changing European funding priorities on the wider stage. Research and innovation investment is what creates the resources that all other spending flows from, in actual fact. To quote a Polish philosopher, another mathematician, I learned actually in the end that our new Pope is also a mathematician, so it goes to show STEM can take us many, many places. I wasn't aware of that until today. Jacob Pronowski, the Polish mathematician, said that knowledge is an unending adventure at the edge of uncertainty. We cannot control uncertainty, but we can control our journey. And the world can be uncertain now, but the impact of our research, the quest for knowledge, the pursuit of excellence, and our belief in our ability to deliver the impact we need is entirely within our control, and I intend to steer that as Minister working with you in the community. I'm aware also, looking to the skills mission, that our research does not exist in a vacuum. It provides the building blocks, but we must build on top of it, and that's where our skills comes to the journey. If research fuels innovation, then skills drive the realization of that innovation. Skills are key to our resilience and social cohesion. Skills open the door to many opportunities. I read recently with interest the research output of Megan Mackey. She is a third-year PhD candidate in UCD from Canada. She intends to stay in Ireland after her conferral. Her research expanded the range of the Denisovans, and early human species became extinct. There are many theories on why that happened. Perhaps we, as Homo sapiens, were able to outcompete the Denisovians due to our skills. Skills have always been key to Ireland's success, and I'm equally focused on ensuring we do not have a gap in our skills framework. My vision is for us to work together and with other stakeholders to expand higher education provision in key disciplines where there is a shortfall of graduates, as well as preparing for possible uncertainties ahead. I am sure that we will need more digital and green skills in the coming years to prepare for the challenges we currently see and to meet the demands of the future economy, as well as valuing traditional skills such as construction, and in fact reinventing ways to do the same old things in new modern ways, such as through the modern methods of construction that my department has prioritised and advanced, such as the Mount Lucas Training Centre and many other initiatives around the country. I am amending the National Training Fund Act to enable new investment announced in Budget 25 to flow into the system from 2026 onwards. The government has committed just under €1.5 billion from the National Training Fund over the 6 years leading into 2030, delivering a major boost for higher education, skills and research. For the first time, National Training Fund funding will cover new areas, including capital investment, core higher education funding and research supports. This investment will deliver modern, world-class training facilities and will ensure we are ready for the skills needs of the future. It's a critical step to secure Ireland's workforce in a time of global change. I was privileged to open the RDS Craft Show last week on Friday, and I viewed the work of the many artisans, from wood turners to farriers to metal workers to leather workers, and the many traditional skills that were on offer. Their work balances tradition with innovation, an intrinsic part of our cultural identity, but also a driver of economic growth. So I thank you, and of course the Education and Training Boards, for producing a skilled talent pipeline for Ireland's construction industry, an area where we are all aware we need continued and increased effort to meet our societal challenges, to provide housing for all, and that is all core to our economic and national mission. We have also reformed the National Skills Council to help us adapt and evolve in response to changing skills needs. And we put in place the National Skills Observatory so that we can have that bird's eye view of the future skills needs, of where we will need year on year and what areas we need to focus on, and in turn our educational institutions can begin to map that pipeline. We may be entering a phase of economic uncertainty, and history has shown us this leads to inevitable rises in demand for higher education. And it is essential that our skills and education systems are well prepared, and that means well funded, if this comes to pass. I spoke about the Denisovians. Darwin said that the species that survives and thrives is not the strongest, nor the fastest, but is the species that is most adaptable to change. And we need to be adaptable to face change and tackle it and move it forward. Many of the skills of today didn't exist yesterday. Many of the skills of tomorrow don't exist today. We will use that National Skills Observatory to guide our work as educators, trainers and policymakers to understand the skills needs of the future and prepare for them. Because we're not just preparing learners for today's jobs, we're equipping them with the adaptability, critical thinking and resilience that they will need to thrive in careers that are still to be imagined. We need that agility and flexibility in our system, and we need to be prepared to respond to labour market shifts. Unlike the Denisovians, we must be ready to compete, and I will be a partner with industry to help you prepare. The third pillar of my vision, it goes to our higher education system, high quality and highly accessible. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today, the words of Malcolm X, and to realise our ambitions, we must get the fundamentals right. This begins, I believe, with sustainable core funding to give higher educational institutions the stability that they need to plan, to deliver on strategic reforms, and to meet demand. As I mentioned, I've already secured Cabinet approval in the last fortnight to unlock the remaining 100 million additional core investment per annum through the National Training Fund. That is a critical part of funding the future and one that has been long awaited. The National Development Plan is currently under review. I intend to reorientate the multi-annual source of investment beyond traditional bricks and mortar infrastructure, although that is critical, but to widen and broaden that towards a more extensive portfolio, one that extends to funding for research and technology. I want to see more robust institutional governance, enable our higher education institutions to thrive and innovate, supported by the Higher Education Authority Act. And we also need to orientate the sector to ensure the needs of society are being met, I'm working to increase the number of therapist places to service disability, for example, as well as working with the HGA to increase courses in dentistry, veterinary medicine, nursing, and across the healthcare and therapist professions. This is working towards aligning our skill needs with our societal needs, and we all understand that our disability and healthcare needs provide us with a great societal challenge, which is something we can meet through that skills pipeline and through that higher education artery. My department is also developing a tertiary education strategy, the first of its kind, to set out a long-term vision for higher education, research and skills. Just last week, I launched the third phase of this program with 38 degree courses now available, double what was available to students in the previous year. And I want a system that works for everybody, not just for some. My vision is of a higher education system that reflects the full diversity of our society and provides pathways and opportunities for all. I want to target investment at underrepresented groups. I'm taking a more targeted approach to the cost of education, which focuses on continuing to help people that need it most. We recently increased the SUSI threshold for income to $115,000 for undergraduate students. I intend to make further changes in this year's budget to continue to address access and support those that need it. Interventions, in my opinion, should be fair, targeted, and progressive. The cost of education is multifaceted. There is no single solution or blunt instrument that would suit every learner and appropriate to all stages. So our response must be appropriate, tailored, targeted, and designed to be sustainable, costed, and deliverable year on year. I'm also focusing on student accommodation. I want to see students move from private rentals in an ever-shrinking circle, unfortunately, with our housing challenges, into purpose-built student accommodation. This will improve their well-being, it will ease pressure on the wider housing market, it will allow them to focus on their academic journeys and the college life and college societies and all that goes with it, instead of commuting long distances or struggling to find accommodation. My department is developing a new student accommodation strategy as we speak. And of course, cost is only one part of improving access, a very important part, but there are many other aspects. And another critical step is developing flexible and diverse pathways into education. This means investing in opening more flexible and inclusive routes into the system. The part-time fee scheme is a milestone. It marks the first time part-time students have been eligible for financial support under the Student Support Act. That is a real step forward for learners with caring responsibilities, jobs, and other commitments. I had the opportunity to speak to some of our new tertiary learners in Grange Gorman last week, and people who never thought they could have a place in college, who lacked the confidence and the belief that they could be part of the system, who are now not just surviving, but thriving in the system, having been opened the door through a flexible, diverse new pathway, and actually beginning to really succeed and believe. And that is infectious, and that is dynamic, and that is contagious, and that is a very good thing. I want to improve that progression further between further and higher education, to work with universities to expand those tertiary degree programs. And as I said, the ones that allow their learners to start the degree in a local ETB and progress into a traditional higher education institution to progress it, that is a fundamentally positive change. And I was really gratified to see the impact it had on individual students when I had the opportunity to meet them recently. And those pathways are about inclusion, but they're about so much more. They're unlocking the full potential of our people, because when everyone has the chance to succeed, we all succeed. Before I close, I want to commend the IUA, the Irish University Association, in your continued advocacy for Ireland's public universities, for being a voice for the sector, a very articulate and reasoned voice, a strong voice, and one that has given new momentum, I think, to the sector overall. SA and Hockey at Togamead in New, and located across the country, our universities are our beacons for the future. Through creating, sharing, and applying research and knowledge, you enable innovation across the country and ensure that our knowledge economy not only remains competitive, but can also continue to thrive in times of uncertainty. And I recognise too that this is a shared responsibility. And as Minister, I am guided by 4 clear priorities. 1, to foster research and innovation as an economic enabler. 2, to provide high quality, highly accessible higher education. 3, to expand our pathways to skills, reskilling, and apprenticeships that match Ireland's evolving workforce needs. And 4, to promote curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge as a public good. These are the goals I'm working to deliver, and I look forward to partnering with all of you to make it a reality. And I'm going to close with a quote from George Bernard Shaw, who said, "We are made wise not by the recollection of our past, but by the responsibility of our future. And that is a responsibility that I take very seriously and that I understand. And our shared success depends on our ability to adapt, to support each other, to collaborate, and to innovate. I look forward to higher education and research continuing to step up to the challenge and providing the skills, talent, knowledge, and innovation that our country needs. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Minister, thank you very much indeed for that very, very comprehensive agenda that you've set out there. We're running a little bit behind time, but I think with your indulgence, we might run slightly over our allotted time just to pick up on some of the themes you have there. I should have said at the outset, we have all presidents of our member universities here with us today. It's unusual for us to get them all together in one room, so we have to mind them. Minister, you mentioned uncertainty on a number of times during your speech, and obviously we're in uncertain times, economic headwinds potentially facing us. In that scenario, our good friends up the road in Merrion Street in finance and public expenditure are their default position is stop spending. But I think, as Warren Buffett would say, you invest in a recession and you reap the rewards later, which seems to be your philosophy. How do you overcome that innate resistance to batten down the hatches?
Well, when you speak about Warren Buffett, I'm not sure was it him that coined the phrase "to speculate, to accumulate." But I think that the core idea, my view, is that capital spending is never wasted. Normally we refer to infrastructure, we talk about our bridges, our railways, our ports, etc. But in my department, research spending, higher education spending, supporting the education system is that type of capital spending. It's not current expenditure, to meet operational needs. It's building a strategic framework that we can develop upon. It's rare. I have mentioned uncertainty because we are in uncertain times, but the time to be worried is when we think we're in certain times. Because if we look at I think all of history, but particularly the last couple of decades, we've had rapid change, we've had rapid evolution, and the way we prepare for that is, as I've outlined, is by investing in our educational systems, in our research systems, and looking around the corner, looking around at what's coming next. And I suppose part of that, in my opinion, is that we don't actually know what's coming next. I was at a discussion like this recently, and there's a lot of talk in the room around, was in the computing area, was it quantum, was it AI, was it digital, what was going to be the next big thing, and which one should we put our chips on? And the conclusion actually was, well, we don't know. That's the whole point. We don't know what the next big thing is. So we actually focus on basic research, and we get people to examine and actually come up with the next big thing unexpectedly. In terms of the conversation with the government, the Taoiseach is a great believer in the importance of education and research. Indeed, as President Davis said at the start of the session, I think it was in this room to this audience that he announced the creation of my department 5 years ago. So that's certainly a very important, I suppose, belief from the top. But I welcome assistance of all in terms of preaching the gospel to all that will listen across Merrion Street and elsewhere in terms of the importance of investment in this sector.
I think there'll be a huge welcome from everyone in the system on your very strong indication on a new PRTLI or whatever it might be called. And you are talking here, from what you've said, about something at scale. Can you just plot out for us the sort of milestones that you see in that over the next sort of 12, 18 months in terms of making that happen?
Sure. So the type of investment that I envisage is not a sort of one-year program. I mean, there's been very many welcome interventions in recent years for equipment renewal and various different opportunities, but I'm looking at something on a step change beyond that again in terms of a multi-annual, multi-year, 5 or more year type framework that will, I hope, flow from the National Development Plan. So in terms of, you asked about public expenditure, and the pressures on the public purse are always great. But there is an opportunity now, because we're at that midterm review of the National Development Plan, which runs from 2020 to 2030. There's a midterm review ongoing this summer. And that is the opportunity, I suppose, to pitch for significant multi-annual funding of that type. How I envisage it will work, there is a working group engaged on that at the moment, including people from the sector and right across the board. But I want to visit a couple of layers. At very high level, I think we do need to replace some of that equipment that was funded in the first initial rounds many years ago, which served its purpose well, but I think is now at the stage, in many cases, of being renewed. We need to invest in capacity building, things like high-performance computing, things like quantum computing require significant investment in server farms, machines, multiple CPUs, spectrometers, all sorts of pieces of kit that in some cases are too large or too expensive for one institution to purchase on its own. So there's a model I think we could develop of a shared centres of different disciplines and people plug into them in different ways. That's sort of a base layer, but I think ultimately, in the same fashion as the original PRTLI, a competitive call actually raises the bar for everybody. So people can pitch in, teams can pitch in with their own thoughts and ideas. There will be significant funding backing it, but what will emerge from that call, and I envisage on the basis of, again, like the old PRTLI, an international expert panel to review applications, independent of myself or anybody else in the department, but making those calls on the basis of excellence and opportunity, and that being then rewarded with significant funding, which I hope will be a game changer again to drive us on to the next stage.
But I should have said at the outset that we got a large number of questions from you and from our attendees online, and I'm attempting to group those together and hit the main points on this. And hopefully we may have time for a few questions at the end from the floor. Skills, you've obviously, a significant part of your speech was devoted to this. One of the challenges we've had in the past is that the planning for skills tend to be done piecemeal. If we take healthcare, for example, we've HSE, Department of Health, telling us that we need to double the number of healthcare staff across a whole range of professions over the next 5 years. Now, they said that 2 or 3 years ago, but we're not seeing, a workforce planning strategy that would bring that to life. Our universities are up for this, but the question is how you get a whole of government response on a critical issue such as that.
No, so I think it's a really good question, and you're right. It is so important that we, I suppose, focus on that. The National Skills Council, ably led by Kevin Marshall, has done great work on that, a relatively new body. With the OECD Skills Report in 2023, the National Skills Council was partly a follow-on from that. And the intention there is to create this National Skills Observatory, which is a lens that we can focus and say, what are the skills that we will need this year, next year, over the next decade. As everybody in the room will be very well aware, skills are not something that can be turned on and off easily. Most courses have a multi-year program, 4 years or more. So we have to look a little bit down the line in terms of if we need new healthcare graduates, for example, as we do, it will take a minimum of 4 years for those that start this September, in some cases longer. We are responding to that need. So, for example, the healthcare need, that is a great challenge for disability supports and for enabling people to participate more fully in the workforce and education and everything else in life. I am working on that. It's a whole of government priority, but we have skills needs across renewable energy. We have a huge opportunity as a country to harness our wind energy from our west coast and beyond. I think we can actually become the equivalent of the Aberdeen oil boom, could be the West of Ireland wind boom. I think there's an opportunity for us to create sovereign wealth, which again can be reinvested in our national infrastructure and public good. We need construction skills, we need climate skills, we need engineering skills to do that. Our construction skills, the traditional craft and trades we need for our housing. We know we're deep into a housing challenge and we're trying to get out of that. And we need significantly more tradespeople to do that. So how do we do that? We try to create additional places. We try to focus on what the needs are. We create a pipeline to match it. And of course, then we have our as I mentioned in my speech, the pharmas, the life sciences, the digital, the multinational industries, which are here, semiconductors, and we look at the future needs and we try to manage the pipeline. And I spoke to a country manager for one of our multinational headquartered companies recently, and I said, what's the one thing that I could do in this job that will, in terms of your needs, in terms of your workforce and your strategic long-term intentions in Ireland? And he put it very simply, he said, keep the talent pipeline flowing. I think that's actually a good way to put it up. Keep the talent pipeline coming. Keep the skills needs, the talent, the innovation coming through. So I suppose I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the Skills Observatory and the Skills Council to identify those needs and ensure that we can keep that skills pipeline coming through.
One of the key areas of the pipeline that those multinational and indeed indigenous companies look for are PhD graduates and master's graduates. You referenced it in your speech. We've had some very positive initiatives from the government over the last couple of years on the PhD stipends, and I know a number of people ask questions about this. But the problem with that is that actually we spend more money on paying for a smaller number of PhDs, whereas actually in comparison with other European countries, we need to grow our population of PhD students and indeed master's students.
Yeah.
How are you going to tackle that?
Yeah, so again, I suppose it comes back, ultimately, all this comes back to funding and all this comes back to resources, and that's part of my, I suppose, request to central government. But I intend, in terms of whatever resources available to me, that PhDs students will be prioritised as individuals, and the 25,000 per annum stipend is significant progress towards that in terms of, I suppose, easing the burden on them day to day, but also in terms of broadening that channel, in terms of creating more PhD places, allowing more PhD students to come to the system, because I think our PhD students are the backbone of our research framework, who want to become postdocs and investigators and lead teams, etc. in due course. And they're also the flow of ideas, and ideas really are the secret ingredient in the formula for everything that flows. So I intend to, and it's already part of my, I suppose, budgetary proposals, to widen the flow of PhDs through increasing the number of places, through increasing funding.
And that'll be tagged in, presumably, to the PRTLI programme or alongside it?
Alongside it, yeah.
Okay.
So I think the PRTLI, perhaps not the most, it doesn't trip off the tongue, but we might, I'm codenaming it the TIF, the Talent Infrastructure Fund, because it's equipment, it's competitive calls, but it's talent. Because without the people, we can have all the equipment and infrastructure we want. If we don't have the people to staff them and equip them and research on them, they're the missing link.
Minister, I should say at the outset, I don't want you to interpret this next question as gimme more.
I'd be disappointed if it wasn't.
But, I think what government has done through Funding the Future, to the moves that have been made, to some of the things you've spoken about, have been really appreciated by the system. But the challenge, I think, and you referenced it in your own speech, is the stability of universities who are running the system on your behalf. One of the areas we got a huge amount of funding through last year to cover an enormous backlog in pay awards for university staff. And that's arisen simply because of national pay agreements over the last 2 to 3 years. But every president sitting here in the front row started January the 1st this year with not enough money in their budget to pay for their existing staff. That is a simple fact. In some cases, 5, 6, 7, 8 billion euro in particular universities. On the other hand, they have an obligation under the law to balance their budgets. So what can you do to permanently address that? I know it's been addressed, and a significant part of what came last year was in a supplementary budget at the end of the year. But no university president can actually plan to say, I hope I might get that money in December. Because if they did, they could actually be breaking the law by the time December comes if they don't get it.
Yeah. No, I'm sure, and good governance is essential. So, I wouldn't expect anybody to be out on a wing and a prayer looking for funding that may materialize towards the end of the year. My understanding is that the baseline has now been increased, the year-on-year baseline, to reflect the pay awards, and that's being factored into the last budget. I mentioned I've brought through a secured cabinet approval to revise the National Training Fund legislation. That allows for an additional 150 million per year into the higher education system to fund the universities. There was a gap of 307 million identified in the Funding the Future report, successor from the CAS's report, and we're pretty close to getting to that figure. So we have 100, I think, already pledged, a further 150 coming through. Now, the legislation has to go through the Houses. I've secured cabinet approval for that to be drafted.
But Minister, that 307 is filling the gap that was there. The pay awards were the other piece layered in on top of this, and we have more coming through this year. So it's bigger than 307 when you put it all together.
Sure. So, and I suppose the overall budget is bigger than that as well, and the department budget has to manage that and work towards that as well. So that's an ongoing, I suppose, conversation and challenge that I have as well in terms of managing the money as well and making those numbers add up. And I always want to do more with less, but it's not straightforward. And if any research project can identify, I saw there's a micro-credentials course which my department offers, or the system offers as well. And I think it's an excellent innovation actually for people that want to take short courses that want to skill up. But there was one I saw on managing resources, making sensible financial decisions. And I thought if I took that course myself, it might aid my my budgetary management. But I don't think I have time to take it on.
Well, look, I think the system certainly won't be shy about continuing, I suppose, to push for this. I suppose the way this plays out in a real sense is in the student-staff ratios, and
yes,
you know,
yes.
in spite of all the very good things that recent governments have done in trying to, correct some of the issues that we've had from the previous decade. Our staff-student ratios have gone in the wrong direction. Why? Because we have a third more students came into the system and the funding simply didn't catch up.
Yeah.
So would that be something that you can pledge to actually genuinely deliver on during the term of your office?
No, look, it absolutely is. And I think the quality of education is often a function of the numbers in education. Now, I remember lecture halls that had 300 people in them, and maybe that's still the way sometimes for some of our first-year undergraduate courses. But we're working towards a much smaller sort of class size, group size. I think the figures from 2021 perhaps don't do us a little bit of a disservice. I think there might have been 21 to 1 or 22 to 1. I think it's down a little bit to 19, maybe 19 to 1 now. So look, it's still not quite where we'd want it to be as a metric, but it's certainly progressed the right direction in the last couple of years. And that is something I will focus on reducing further in the next term ahead.
Okay. I might come to the audience in a moment, so I'll just take maybe a couple of questions. But just to move to the capital side, outside of the research side, you mentioned student accommodation. Obviously, like this is hugely challenging across government, not just for students. Various efforts have been made to try to address this, but we're kind of stuck in this vice of viability in terms of trying to build student accommodation at a price that's affordable for students to take up. What can we do about this? What can government do about this?
So look, I suppose there's two phases there. So the first is the short-term activation fund, which is my department launched prior to my own tenure, but it was launched by my predecessor, and that's a really good idea to fast-track existing capacity or existing potential within the system. So we have a number of the universities present have projects in that, and we're hoping to bring those on stream in the next 12 to 18 months in terms of delivering new beds that can be delivered in reasonably short order. But in parallel to that, and as a more strategic medium-term objective, we're delivering the student accommodation strategy at the moment. That is something our department are intensely engaged in. And that will provide, for example, the framework. So if we go to build a new secondary school, if you go to a lot of school openings, as I tend to do at local level at least, you'll see that there's a sort of almost Lego-like framework, that they have a similar build spec, and not every project is starting from scratch with a new architect and new design and looking at a white piece of paper. So we are looking at a common specification, student accommodation spec, and also asking questions such as what is appropriate for student accommodation, what level of space, size, comfort, quality, sharing of utilities is appropriate, what will work best, how can we, being honest, sweat the assets, how can we get the most for the resources that are put into it, and how can we turn around quickly, because I think this is something we don't have the luxury of time on either. So that is a work in progress. I expect that strategy to be published this summer, and we'll take the conversation from there.
Briefly, two other aspects of capital investment. Under the Climate Action Plan, universities, like all public bodies, have a requirement to reduce their carbon footprint by 51% by 2030. We've done a pretty detailed exercise, which I think we've shared with you. You may not have seen it amidst all the documents that are thrown at you in the first 3 months, but it's over €500 million. So this is another give me more question, I guess, because there is no capacity within the system to actually fund that. And I imagine that this is a similar issue with schools and hospitals and elsewhere. Universities and the staff that work in them and the presidents who run them want to do the right thing, and they want to reach their climate action targets. How do we go about that together?
Yeah, so that is difficult, and there's no denying that. And actually, I was partly surprised to learn that my department, I suppose the real estate under it, is one of the largest sort of property portfolios, I think, second only to Department of Education, because they've all the schools. And many of those are not where we'd like them to be in terms of carbon targets. And some of that comes from history, some old buildings, some wonderful old Ivy League institutions, but they can be more challenging then to retrofit or to insulate and to turn them into a more carbon neutral fashion. It is expensive as well. There's no getting around that. And it's something that I'm engaged in at the moment. I've spoken to experts within my team, and it's something that is going to be an ongoing challenge, but it's something that we have to do, and ultimately something that will pay for itself, I think, in the long term as well, because we will reap those savings in the medium term, but it is a short-term challenge, and that's undeniable.
And there is another area of digital infrastructure. I'm not going to go into it, but I think there's another dimension there to the capital investment challenge. Conscious of time, we're slightly over time, but I am going to take just a couple of quick questions from the floor, if I may. There is one here. I'm going to take maybe 2 or 3 together. There's one over here. Yes, this one first.
Thanks, Jim. Orla Shields
Orla.
from Trinity College. Minister, thank you very much for that. I'm just wondering, I was really interested in what you were saying about addressing our skills needs, and as Jim said, we're all up for the challenge of taking more students, and you referenced healthcare in particular. I'm wondering if we're missing an opportunity in addressing the recruitment of more students, but not the retention of our graduates. And I know it's beyond the remit possibly of a single department, but should we not be thinking of that cohesively?
You want to take a few questions? Or
I'll take them all together, if I may.
Yeah.
Yes, there was one here, that person there. Yes, I think the chap with the beard beside you, right there. Yes, there. Well, actually, 2 together with a beard. That's Frank beside you.
Your own beard. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Minister, for that very enlightening and uplifting presentation. I can't disagree with anything at all you say. My name is Edward Lehiff. I'm a lecturer and member of Governing Authority in UCC. I'm very glad that Jim brought you back to, if you like, the undergraduate dimension and the staff-student ratio, because really, while we have this bold vision of research-led higher education, without our permanent lecturers, without the basic classrooms, lecture halls, and labs, if I may be so bold as to say, really the sine qua non of all of the rest of the vision. So it's really important that we don't lose sight of that in the midst of everything else. But my particular question is about the people at the heart of our research strategy. As things stand, we don't really have a career framework for researchers that give them career advancement and permanence, which is essential to building effective research infrastructure and the human dimensions of it. I'm wondering what you have to say on that aspect. Thank you.
Minister, we might take one more before we go. Kevin O'Sullivan, over here. Irish Times.
Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you, Minister. Just in relation, 2 things. In relation to your indication that you are going to try and attract researchers from the United States, can you give some detail as to how you're going to do that? You know, I gather you're going to appoint new professorships. How many are involved? What's the timeline on it? And secondly, as many will know, the president of the European Horizon Programme was in Dublin recently, and she said, Marie Lepton, that it would be reasonable to increase funding annually for Research Ireland from 300 million to 1 billion, given where the country is and its wealth and all that. And do you have a response on that, please?
Okay, so
in whichever order you'd like, Minister.
Yeah, sure. So I might take them in the order that they were raised. So we'll start with I think you're dead right about the retention aspect. And it does strike me, I was in India as part of my St. Patrick's Day mission this year. Obviously, we all go different parts of the world on St. Patrick's Week and exploit the goodwill, and the shamrock goes far around the globe. But one of the key, I suppose, missions was attracting Indian students to Ireland, and many of them come every year. And I think Indian, Chinese and US historically have made up the top 3 in terms of international students. But it does strike me as a little bit ironic that as we're doing that incentive or that mission, we are equally seeking new healthcare experts and professionals in the system, and yet we're seeing some of our sort of homegrown or locally educated being, to go the other direction. How do we address that? So I suppose it is a perennial chestnut that comes around. There are some thoughts as to, I think the Scottish system may have a limit that publicly educated graduates work within the system for, I think it's 2 to 3 years, perhaps post-graduation. It's an idea. Whether it's a carrot or a stick, should it be some kind of incentive as opposed to some kind of restriction? I think there's benefits. I think that's certainly something that it probably is in all of government as opposed to one ministry, but certainly something I'm engaged on and seized of. The flip argument to that is that many of our graduates spend time abroad but return and bring that skills and experience with them. And I think that's certainly an opportunity that we shouldn't deny anybody, but and I think that people are richer for that experience. But I certainly think that at a time of greater need, when particular areas are in particular demand, that we should give serious consideration to at least some incentive, if not a limitation, at least some kind of incentive to keep those people around. So it's a work in progress. It's something I'm very conscious of myself, and I'm glad you posed the question because I think we all need to consider how that might work. In terms of the human capital and the framework for researchers, that's something, again, I suppose if we started there, but I completely agree that there is a pyramid and we can have wonderful research and innovation and funding for that. And that should flow down, but also the entry point is your first year undergraduate course, of course, and your buildings, your investment, your lecturers, and all that goes with that has to be the building block and the foundation stone for everything else that flows in higher education. So the PhD stipend, the 25,000, I suppose, is a chart of that towards making PhD journeys a little bit more attractive to those that go down that route. But there's a lot more work to do in terms of where we go next from that. And I know we're at the IUA today, but in terms of the technological universities, creating a professorship grade in those is something that's very much on my list. It's in the programme for government. It's something I'm absolutely committed to do, and I hope to have progress on that very, very soon. So just to mention that. And then in terms of Kevin, it's two questions from Kevin. So Kevin O'Sullivan, the US researchers, so I don't want to go into too much detail because I've yet to bring an amendment through Cabinet to have that, I suppose, debated and approved. I don't want to preempt any decisions, although I think it's fair to say there's good support within the system across government for what I'm trying to do. But how I envisage it working is that all of our esteemed presidents and colleagues and higher education institutional people in the room and elsewhere, there's already good working relationships with many of our American partners, and my understanding is there are already soft noises being made, and people are sort of inquiring and delicately saying, well, what's going on in Europe, what's going on in Ireland. Others are perhaps less reticent about it. Macron, Vive la Europe, last on Easter, I think it was on Easter Monday, gave a call to arms and sort of an open invite. I've been part of those discussions at European level too with the Council of Ministers. I think there's a shared European collective, and I do think that, maybe this is more geopolitical, but I think that it is time that Europe finds its own strength, and we are Europeans, and we're at the heart of Europe here in Ireland, and across many fronts, that Europe can be a superpower politically, educationally, in terms of research and innovation, and that we have to stay strong and stand on our own feet and attract people from all corners of the world on that basis. In terms of the European Research Council, so I met Ms. Latova when she was over during her visit and had some really good conversations with her, dinner at Trinity hosted by the Provost, and that was a really excellent engagement. She talked about increasing research funding to closer to 1 billion. I don't disagree, but I suppose what has to be worked out is where that money is spent and how we spend it. So, for example, the TIF, the Talent Infrastructure Framework, the new PRTLI, the research centres that we already have, the Research Ireland budget, the investment in equipment renewal, the investment in shared infrastructure like high performance computing, or spectroscopy. There are many, many areas. I would spend as much as I can persuade central government to give me. But I do have a vision for a very significant funding uptick. But exactly the details of what agency, what project, what spend it goes on, I suppose remains to be determined. But certainly I would agree that we do need to do a lot more and spend a lot more than perhaps has been to date.
Okay, well, listen, Minister, maybe on that note, we might call it a day. You mentioned, I think, more than once in your speech that there may be times when you would expect to disagree. I won't be around very much longer to disagree with you, but I've absolutely no doubt that my colleagues in the IUA will, where appropriate, disagree with you. But I think also, and I think it's reflected in the approach today, you can rest assured that our universities are here to work with you. We're on the same team here trying to make stuff happen. And I think it's reassuring for the universities, and this is referenced in our own discussions, that we have a minister who understands the system and who has passion for what we do. And I think that can carry a long way. So can I ask you both here in the room and at home, if you're still watching us, to give you can bang the table if you're at home or in the office, a warm thanks, please, to our guest minister.
Thanks
very much.
Thank you.
And thank you. We're done.
Thank you.